Uh-oh. Can you guys see the screen okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Oh, I still need to send you the new image, don't I?
Yes. Okay.
Actually, let me verify. That's what I was doing. So they need to confirm which one they want y'all to use.
Oh,
You guys see the banner, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Letting everybody in. Uh-oh. Come on. We got one more waiting to come in. But otherwise, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining us for today's A Month of Service presentation of property taxes, exemptions, and payment options. My name is Nia Murray. I work as the programs coordinator with Neighborhood Recovery Community Development Corporation, and we are one of the partners in the A Month of Service collaboration. But also included is the City of Houston's Department of Neighborhoods, the Harris Central Appraisal District, and joining us on behalf of HCAD, we have Ms. Mabel Menifee and Ms. Donna Pensick. Also, one of our presenting partners with the Harris County Tax Office, we have Ms. Shay Pinkowski, who's going to be providing the information for you all today. But also included in the partnership, we have Lone Star Legal Aid, Harris County Harris County Prosecutors or Harris County Attorney's Office. Uh, why can't I think of any of our partners today? Right, like my mind is going blank. The Texas Legal Services Center, Houston Volunteer Lawyers, and the Earl Carl Institute. And together we make up a month of service. And basically, the month of service is the collaboration of all of our organizations coming together on a monthly basis and offering a variety of different workshops, resources, and information to the community that we all service. And we decided to collaborate several years ago in an effort to reach more people and to create a larger impact and to try to get as much information out to the community as we possibly can. So we decided to pool a lot of our initiatives together as part of that collaboration. And one of those initiatives is getting the information out about property taxes and the various exemptions that even to this day, people still don't know that they are eligible for, that they can apply for, don't know about payment options when they potentially can become delinquent on their property taxes. And so that's what we're here for today, to provide this information for you all. So we want to thank you all on behalf of the collaboration for attending this session today. We do hope that you all get the information that you intended to receive by coming here today. We do ask that you pay it forward and share the information that you all receive with any of your relatives, co-workers, or anybody that you all know of that may also find the information to be beneficial. After the presentation is done, we will send out a link of the session along with any links to various sites or any resources that get mentioned throughout the presentation for you all to have access to and to, again, also share. Do know that we record the session. We do also broadcast live on our social media platforms. So we do ask that you all be as interactive and engaging as you'd like to be. However, do keep in mind that we do record and do broadcast live. So we want to try to protect your privacy as best as we possibly can. So we do ask that you try to keep your questions to be general in nature, not to divulge any personal detailed information that you live at ABC Park Place Way and you're married to such and such and your parents passed away on X day. You know, we don't want that level of detail on this platform. So we don't need all that information kind of getting out there. If you do have a specific or particular situation that you need addressed, please feel free to message the presenters in the chat and they'll give you their contact information or what have you for you to contact them for more one-on-one detail. But otherwise, if you guys keep your questions to be as general as you possibly can, feel free to type those questions into the chat. I know that there were a few questions that were emailed to me when you guys registered in advance, and I'll be reading those if the presenters don't go over that information throughout the presentation. If you are joining us on social media, I do monitor those the comment section. So feel free to type your question into the comment section there, and I'll make sure that your question is asked at the end of the presentation when we get to the Q&A segment. So There's a lot of information that's going to be covered here today. We do these presentations now every other month. It's the fourth. Is this the fourth Wednesday? Oh man, it's the end of the month already. Okay, the fourth Wednesday. I had to think about that. The fourth Wednesday of every other month. So we will be back in October. Feel free to join us as often as you would like. These presentations are free to the public. So again, we want to welcome you all and thank you all for being here. If this is your first time joining us, thank you all for tuning in. If you're a repeat um, participant. We want to welcome you all back and thank you for your continued support of this month of service collaboration. So, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. Ms. Shea, we're going to have you introduce yourself first, and then Ms. Mabel, you can introduce and then go right into your presentation.
All righty, fabulous. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shay Pinkowski, and I'm here presenting for the office of Annette Ramirez, the Harris County Tax Assessor Collector's Office. I do apologize. My screen and my camera seem to lag a little bit, so I might turn this off just to not be so distracting. But the information will all be on the presentation board here. As Ms. Nia mentioned, we do like to keep everything really general when it comes to specific information. I'll have contact information at the end of my presentation in case anyone would like to send something directly for something more specific that you have questions about. But I really look forward to being able to share some information with everyone and be able to assist with any questions y'all might have. But I'm looking forward to it. So I'll go ahead and pass this along to the next presenter. But I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Mabel.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mabel Menifee, and I'm with the Harris Central Appraisal District. And with me today, my colleague Donna Pensick, whose expertise in customer service will be able to move us forward today as well. I'm with the Public Affairs Department as Community Relations, and we have been partnering with the AMOS group for a number of years now. And typically, a lot of the information we go over each time. But in a lot of cases, we do it in a particular context because a lot of times we found that when people listen to it, unless they've got a specific issue or question in mind, sometimes that information it kind of doesn't resonate as well as it might had they been listening for a particular answer. So today, I'd like to put it in a little bit of context in terms of where we are in the property tax calendar year. Uh, we've gone through the valuation process, which is what 8CAT does. We have as property owners, you've received your value notices. You have been given the opportunity to protest. Many of you have already, if you decided to protest, many of you have already done that. The majority of property in Harris County has been certified to the taxing jurisdictions. So where are we now? We're currently in that in-between phase where your the taxing jurisdictions, that being the city, the county, the school districts, are setting their rates, their property tax rates for what will be reflected on your bill come October or so when the tax bills are mailed out. So as we're sort of in between that phase, I'm going to cover a little bit on both sides of it. So if there are any questions, please feel free to ask those in the chat. If we can't answer them today, we can certainly refer them to one of our other content department specialists, and we'll be able to get back with you. All right, so let's get started. I'd like to do a quick little, let's see, let me share. And I think you can see that, right? Is that correct? Can you see that?
It's loading. Yes, ma'am.
Oh,
You're good.
all righty. Well, let's get started with our presentation today. Again, welcome to Texas. If you are new to Texas and just kind of listening in terms of how does the Texas property tax system work, because I can assure you each and every state has a different process. So if you're new, it can be kind of confusing based on what you may have be familiar with if you've moved here from another state. So Here in Texas, we don't have a state income tax, so property taxes tend to pay for the bulk of the local services such as your schools. They provide roads, streets, police, fire protection, that sort of thing. And here in all of the property tax laws that we work from, all of the appraisal districts in Texas are laws that have originated with our state legislature, and they're part of our constitution or our Texas tax code. So having said that, the state agency that typically has oversight for us is the Texas Comptroller's Office. Here in Harris County, which is what Harris Central Appraisal District does, we value property throughout the county, all of the property in the county for taxation ad valorem taxation purposes. Believe it or not, there are over 600 taxing jurisdictions in Harris County. That doesn't mean you pay the 600. That just simply means that depending on where you live, you may have that 4 or 5 that are generally on the tax bill, maybe in some places more. It's going to be based on where you live, your MUD district, your school district. Typically, though, you're going to always pay to the county. You may pay to a different city depending on the municipality. And so what the appraisal district does, what we do in terms of being required to appraise value at 100% of market value. And here in Texas, we do it annually, unlike some places that may do it every 2 years or every 4 years. In Texas, we are required to do so annually. We also administer something called exemptions. And exemptions are something that as a homeowner, you may be entitled to in terms of receiving a discount on on the taxes for your primary residence. There's some other forms of exemptions too, but those are the key ones. So one of the things the appraisal district does, I mentioned to you that there may be there are 600 taxing jurisdictions. You may pay to 4 or 5. The appraisal district decides on the value, and so that value, once it has been certified, is sent to all of those taxing jurisdictions. So they have to use that particular value in setting your tax rates. Just a little bit about HCAD. We have approximately nearly 700 employees, since we are the largest taxing jurisdiction that appraises annually, and we're also the 3rd largest county in the U.S. We're overseen by a chief appraiser. You'll hear chief appraiser. That's he's basically our CEO. And we also have a 9-member administrative board, 3 of whom are publicly elected that you have an opportunity to vote for. We're required by the tax code to be at 100% of market value, and we're tested on that each year by every other year by the state. In addition to that 600 taxing jurisdictions I mentioned, there are about 1.9 million parcels that we're required to appraise. So one of your basic rights as a taxpayer is that when you receive that HCAD value notice, you have the opportunity, if you disagree with it, you can protest it. You can tell HCAD, hey, I think this value is incorrect, and I've got information as to why in terms of the market value. You may know of properties that have sold for less in your area. Formal here, and you have the opportunity to do so either by filing online. You can come in for an informal hearing and meet with an appraiser, or you can go to what's called the Appraisal Review Board, which is a committee or board of citizens that are appointed by our HCAD board to sit in panels to listen to your protests, and then listen to HCAD's information, and then they decide what's to be done in terms of giving you a reduction or not. And while we're on that subject, I mentioned that the Appraisal Review Board. Please keep in mind the Appraisal Review Board is composed of citizens of Harris County, just like I'm assuming most of you are. And it is an opportunity for anyone who might be interested in perhaps sitting on the Appraisal Review Board. Keep in mind that we will have applications for that process up on our website beginning September the 1st. So if you'd like to know a little bit more about the Appraisal Review Board, the Citizens Board that makes the decisions about your value when you protest, then feel free to go to our website in a few days and check it out. Okay, that annual value notice that we send out each year. Just quickly, if you've never seen one, know that there are two values you're going to get on it. One is the appraised value, the other is going to be the market value. The market value is what HCAD determines each year based on the sales in your particular area of town to own similar properties. The appraised value could be very different. It's usually lower because of those exemptions that I mentioned earlier are going to be factored in. And it's also important to keep in mind that the appraised value is what your taxes will be based on. So everyone may not be billed based on the same value because of that appraisal and the benefits that having that exemption provides, which we'll talk about in a minute. It's also important to remember that when you do protest, the protests, however, are going to be based on the market value. That's that annual value that HCAD establishes. And please excuse me. I mentioned it earlier, but just a quick reminder in terms of the appraisal calendar and the annual cycle of appraisal. Remember, we appraise each year, so there's certain deadlines that have to be met, and that is why we depend on you to make sure that you file your protest timely, that you get any additional information that might affect your exemptions in as well. So that January the 1st is the date of appraisal, that your value is based on the condition of your property as of that date. May 15th, again, is the protest deadline. If you'll please excuse me for just one moment. Thank you. May 15th is the protest deadline. Or 30 days from the date of the notice that you receive in the mail, whichever comes later. We're approaching that October-November period when the tax bills are mailed. And then, of course, in February, excuse me.
Go ahead and get yourself a drink. Or yeah, I was about to say, must be something in the air. I could tell you it's just the opposing forces against us trying to keep you from getting this information out to people that they need.
Exactly. And we're not going to let that happen.
Not gonna let that happen.
Okay. I mentioned about the importance of exemptions. Exemptions are what give you a discount on your property taxes. They exclude part of your property from taxation based on your qualifications. The general resident homestead exemption, if you live at a property as your primary residence, it's in your name, you own it, you should all have one. The over 65 is an additional exemption that you will get when you reach the year that you turn 65. There's disability. We'll talk a little bit more about that. There's an over 55 surviving spouse. There are exemptions for disabled veterans and some other service-related exemptions as well. So the general resident homestead exemption, you own an occupied property as your primary residence. We do require, when you're applying for that, some documentation. As you can see here, of course, you have to provide proof of ownership, usually the deed, as well as the driver's license or a state-issued ID, a Texas driver's license, or a state-issued ID, in which the address on the driver's license matches that of the property. One of the best benefits you get from having that exemption is that you get something called a 10% appraisal increase cap. So that means that in times when when property values are rising rapidly, yours will never go over 10%. And what that means is, if you'll excuse me for just one minute. Okay, so what that basically means is that you will never see more than a 10% increase in your property value, even though it may have gone up 15, 20%. Your hot property. You also get a $140,000 school tax exemption by state law. That's required. It's required that all school districts provide that. That basically means that you would not be taxed on the first $140,000 of your home's value. Depending on where you live, you may find other exemptions that your various jurisdictions offer, such as the city, the county, etc. The over 65 and disability exemption. These two are designed pretty much the same. If a person is disabled and unable to work, or once they turn 65, they become eligible for additional exemptions. You can see what these are: an additional $60,000 for school taxes, as well as your taxes being frozen that year. You never pay more than what you paid that year. You'll see some other things too that Shay will talk about, for instance, with the tax deferral. And you can also pay your taxes in installments without penalties. Additionally, other exemptions, depending on where you live, may be offered. And quickly, just to sort of make a difference between the over 65 and the disability, they basically offer both of these exemptions. However, you can only have one. If you're unable to work, you would apply for the disability exemption, which provides you with the same benefits, and it would you would qualify for that under Social Security if you were declared disabled, or in some cases, someone may not be on Social Security. Then they would be able to, we would provide them with the opportunity to provide a physician statement stating so. The over 55 surviving spouse exemption means basically that if your excuse me, if your spouse was already receiving the over 65 exemption and you were at least 55 years of age on the day that your spouse passed away, you would be able to continue that. They would continue that exemption seamlessly going forward. And then there are a number of veterans exemptions that are available to people who served our country, including a partially disabled veterans exemption, as well as one that supports the surviving spouse of a veteran or first responder who's killed in the line of duty. There's also, as you can see, a couple of others here. And all of these information is also available on our website. If anyone's out there listening because they are considering moving into a home soon, please keep in mind that there is something called an immediate resident homestead exemption, where the month that you move in, you are able to get your exemption prorated, even though you didn't live there a full year. Say you moved in May, then you would be able to get that exemption for 7 months of that year. If the home was previously owned and already receiving exemptions, then you would be able to keep the exemptions that the previous homeowner had for the year. So this one is primarily designed for new construction homes or homes where the previous owner had no exemptions. Let's talk a little bit about something called the heirship exemption, and I want to explain what we mean with that. So this would refer to someone living in a home where a deceased relative name is still on the property. No single person owns it because you may have an interest in it because there are other heirs. Well, previously you might have been unable to receive an exemption because you did not own the property 100%. This often happens when someone dies and leaves multiple heirs to share ownership. on with the new HCAT, with the airship exemption, however, there's an opportunity for you because you're living in the home, you're paying the bills, probably paying the taxes. Other heirs may be living somewhere else and benefiting from their own exemptions, or they may be also living there, but you would have the opportunity to get the exemptions granted at 100%. And it's important for the other heirs to also know that this doesn't affect their ownership rights at all. It simply provides uh, the heirs with the opportunity to receive the exemption in full. And that's already on our exemption application. When you go to section 3 of the homestead exemption application, there are a couple of questions that would trigger whether or not you would need to submit some additional information in order to receive this exemption, which typically is, as you can see here, what is required: the affidavit of ownership, the death certificate of the previous owner, and then any citations or whatever from any court records that would help determine ownership. Also, we'd like to, HCAT requires a copy of the most recent utility bill, and that's simply to verify that the home is indeed being lived in. So, exemptions on at HCAT, very easy to apply for. We've done our best. Our folks have done their best to try to make it as easy as possible for you to apply for those exemptions. And if you still have questions, you can go out to something called, you can go out to our website at www.hcat.org, and there's a little tool out there we call the exemption wizard. It allows you to answer a set of questions, and then it will automatically tell you what exemptions you are most likely eligible for. If you still have problems filling out the application, there is also a how-to video for completing that application. The applications can be submitted online, or you can email them to us. We do ask, and this is important, to avoid any delays, we ask that you submit everything at once. Try to make sure you've got those driver's license. If you're a married couple, please remember that and both of your names are on the deed, we need the driver's license of both couples. That's kind of like the number one delay that homeowners experience when they only send in the driver's license of one of the owners. So please make sure you do that. And then I wanted to talk briefly about some temporary exemptions that are out there, because there's just been a new one that's been added. Um, those of you may be familiar with the exemption for property damaged by a disaster, and that basically triggers that there is a temporary exemption that you can receive from which HCAT reviews and grants when there is a disaster in your home. At least 15% of your home has been damaged. Um, it does have to be an officially declared disaster, usually by the governor, and you have up to 105 days after that disaster declaration. So it's good to know here we're not quite through hurricane season, so that's something you might want to keep in, I should say, knock on wood, that's something you would want to keep in mind. Also, the new exemption for 2026 is based on fire damage, and it's similar to the has some similar characteristics to the disaster exemption. It is requires the home to be completely destroyed by fire, and that is one of the things that includes having been 30 days uninhabitable. And for this particular exemption, you have 180 days to apply. It has to be filed within 180 days of the fire. with us. And then we, of course, our appraisers review the application. If denied, property owners do have the right to protest that denial. Those applications are also on our website at www.hcad/forms. Something to keep in mind as well. Hopefully you won't have to use it. And then, of course, please feel free to contact us if you have any additional questions. We're out here on the Northwest Freeway at the Hollister-Tidwell exit. But as I mentioned earlier, we try to make it easier as possible for folks to contact us either online or through our website. And as you can see, the information here, as well as our telephone number. We're open from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and hopefully we will be there to assist you whenever you need it. I want to thank you all for listening to this. We'll be around to answer any additional questions. I do appreciate you bearing with me as I go through allergies or whatever this is, hay fever. So I am now going to turn it over to my colleague down at the tax office, Shay, who's now going to kind of give you the flip side of this once we're done with HCAT and the appraisals, and then she's going to talk about taxes and how your bills are calculated, and a lot of very good information to have for this time of year. So again, thanks everyone.
Thank you, Miss Mabel.
Thank you, Miss Mabel. All righty. 2 seconds to get this screen up.
And again, just as a reminder, you guys feel free to type any questions that you may have into the chat as we move along, and we can make sure that they get addressed at the end.
All righty.
Okay,
Can everyone
Shay.
see my screen okay?
Yes, ma'am. You're good to go.
Beautiful. All righty. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Shay Pinkowski, and I'm here speaking on behalf of the Office of Annette Ramirez, who is our Harris County Tax Assessor Collector's Office. There are quite a few bits of information to get through, so I'm gonna go through this. But if you have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and type them into the chat, and I'll be happy to answer them whenever I get a moment to. So, what does the Harris County Tax Office do? Based off the name, you would assume that they would only collect taxes, but it actually goes a little bit further than that. Aside from collecting property taxes for the county of Harris, we also register Harris County voters. So the voter registrar is the office who is responsible of registering folks to vote. You'll see us a lot training volunteers and anyone that you pass up trying to get you through the ballots. That'd be one of our representatives. Or one of our volunteers rather. We also have a part to play in registering vehicles. So vehicle registration, title transfers, whenever you're first getting your vehicle, whether you're moving in from out of state or you're processing your vehicle's annual registration and getting your new sticker every year, or you're getting parking placards or new license plates, our office is the office that you would stop to do that in. So aside from collecting property taxes, which is what I'm going to be speaking on today, we also do those two other necessary processes. So you'll see a bit of those whenever you come into our office. I'm going to speak a bit about the property tax life cycle. So Miss Mabel did a really great job of explaining how property tax values are appraised, and that's her specialty because she's with the appraisal district. But the appraisal phase is the beginning of that tax cycle. That's when they determine the value on which you are going to be taxed. So that appraisal value is determined by the appraisal district, typically between January and May. After which comes the equalization phase, which is also handled by the appraisal district, but also by the property tax owner. So whenever you own your property, you have the ability to go and protest the value of your property if you disagree with the values that are being presented by the appraisal district. So Ms. Mabel spoke a bit about that earlier. I won't repeat all of that over again. But essentially, that is the second phase, and that typically happens between May and July. The third phase is our assessment phase. This is when all jurisdictions, so the governing entities that collect property taxes for necessary processes, they each determine something called a tax rate. And that tax rate determination process is going on currently at this moment. We won't have the set tax rates until closer to October. But essentially, that tax rate is what helps us determine how much of your property taxes are required in order to maintain our operations for a lot of our necessary processes. So that's maintaining, maintenance and operations for Harris County, for Port of Houston, for the Department of Education, along with your schools, mud districts, emergency services, any kind of jurisdiction that collects a property tax. They have to determine their values and their rates during this phase. And the final phase, which is the one that I'm most familiar with, and I have the privilege of taking care of every year, is the collection phase. This is where we create the statements. That's when we process the bill and have that mailed out, along with the collection of your property taxes. That's when taxpayers come in and make their payments for property taxes. And those taxes are then collected by our office, and then we disperse those tax amounts to the jurisdictions that collect property taxes for them. So while they come to our office, we do not keep those funds. Those funds go to the jurisdictions that are taxing for maintenance and operations. And then the cycle starts over again. So typically that collection phase starts in November, because that's when we begin to send out our statements in the mail. And it says June because at that point in June, at the end of June, we begin to pass on our remaining collections. If they are unpaid, we pass those along to our collections agencies, and then that portion is proceeding from there. But taxes are typically due at the end of January, and on the rare exception where the values are not calculated until after, you might have a later date, but typically it'll be the end of January when you expect to have that bill due. So calculating your tax bill in its essence is not difficult. However, because of all of the moving parts that come to play when it comes to property taxes, it can look quite extensive. So whenever you're looking at your property taxable or your property tax amounts, it's based off of this calculation in its essence, which is the taxable value of your property. That is your appraised value minus any exemptions that are applicable, multiplied by the tax rate, which is determined by each of our jurisdictions, equals to the tax bill. That's the tax amount that you pay, and that's the amount that you see on your statement whenever you get that in November, December. So at its essence, this is the calculation that we use. And of course, exemptions reduce the taxable amount or the taxable value, and that's how you get a reduction to your property taxes through exemptions. But this is the calculation that we use in order to get those calculations out to you. There have been quite a few recent property tax law changes. Ms. Mabel went over quite a few of them herself, due to the fact that they are with exemptions and how those exemptions change. But our school exemptions have gone up, which means that property tax owners who have taxes collected by those schools get those reduced even further. It went from an exemption of $100,000 to $140,000. The school for over 65 and disabled homestead owners went up from a $10,000 exemption to a $60,000 exemption, along with some expansions to qualifications that are required for surviving spouses of veterans whose death was related to a service-connected condition, in addition to temporary exemptions for improvements destroyed by fire. So all of these are processes that happen through the November election. So whenever you go through the general election, you'll see proposals on there as well. These proposals were how these were brought up. So these things change every year. We do get new further additions to this, and we will continue to update them as they come about. But as of now, this is where we're standing. And, it's always good to make sure that you're informed when you're going through the ballots and when you're going through these decisions, because it's important to have your own say when you're going through these processes. So just make sure that you're paying attention whenever those proposals are coming up. So just a little visual representation of how much your taxes can be affected by an exemption being added to your account. On the left, there would be a property with a value of about $400,000, and on the right there is a value for $250,000. And as you can see, those exemptions really do create quite a big difference on your property taxes. Without any exemptions, you rest somewhere around 8,500 to 5,300. And with exemptions for your homestead, it gets reduced to $5,500 and $3,000 approximately. And with the homestead and over 65 or homestead and a disabled exemption, that gets reduced even further. And this is just based off of the numbers that we have for this estimate. But depending on your own situation, it could be more, it could be less. It's just going to depend on the property that's being in question, as well as how long you've had those exemptions and where that sits in Harris County. So this is just kind of an example to show you how much of a difference those exemptions can make, and kind of emphasize how important it is that if you are applicable for those exemptions, that you're going through the process of applying for them and making sure that they're on your property. Tax limitations. This is something that Ms. Mabel brought up in her presentation, but she kind of gave you the general idea. Essentially, what a tax limitation is, you'll hear it referred to as a tax freeze or a tax ceiling, is it limits the amount of taxes that you pay for your school, and a couple of other jurisdictions also allow for it, but it's not all. Most of the time it's a school. And these tax limitations put a freeze on the amount of taxes that you would pay, so long as your property's value doesn't fluctuate too wildly. But this applies to homesteads of property owners who are over the age of 65 or have that disability exemption. So you do have to have both the homestead and the over 65, or the homestead and the disabled person's exemption. And what this does is, like I mentioned earlier, it puts a ceiling on that tax amount. For instance, the first year that you turn over the age of 65, you go and apply for those exemptions. And the taxable value, for an example, is $500 for your school. The following year, you're still in that property, you still have those exemptions on your account, but the value of your property goes up, which it tends to do. We're a growing city, so those values tend to go up. But for instance, the value would go up, and if we were to pay attention to those calculations that we had earlier, your property taxes would have been greater the following year. However, because you have that tax limitation, that tax freeze on your account, you would not pay more than the $500 you paid the year prior. And that is really helpful for folks. It's not something you have to apply for. It's automatically generated within your account. But those taxing limitations really do help in maintaining that ability to pay your property taxes. And it is super duper helpful when it comes to reducing those taxes. So it is something that, as I mentioned before, is automatic. You do not need to apply for it, but not everyone is aware of it. So when they receive their bill, they look at their statement, they see how much their taxable value is and the rate, and it doesn't make sense. Well, that's because the math is not necessarily going based off of only those numbers, but in addition, it's also taking into account a tax ceiling. A tax deferral is another option that we have for our over 65 homesteads or our disabled persons homesteads, or disabled veterans homesteads. And what this does is it postpones your taxes. What does that mean? A postponement of taxes does not mean a cancellation of tax. It does not mean that it is exempt from tax. Whatever value is on your tax statement every December, you are still owing those taxes. However, a postponement of taxes means that you are given additional time in which to pay that amount in taxes. And the postponement that is in the process at this moment allows you to pay during the indefinite time of your living in that property. So long as you are living in the owner of that property, this deferral stays on, and you have an indefinite amount of time to pay those property taxes until you are no longer living in that property. This is done with a 5% interest per year, which is a very large jump away from the normal penalty and interest that would have accrued on your property if you were not in a tax deferral. And it does allow a lot of folks the ability to remain in their home even if they are no longer working or able to pay their property taxes as they normally would have. This is something that is a great tool for a lot of people. It is an insurance. You still are able to continue to pay your property taxes, even if it is under a deferral. you're still able to pay your property taxes timely, or if you'd need that additional time, it is a great insurance to not have that worry over you of having to pay those property taxes by that January 31st date. But it is also something that I really like to ensure and impress upon you that if you are going to have your taxes deferred, that you make sure that you notify your next of kin or whoever you're going to have heir your property in order for them to be aware that these taxes might be due. Because upon either your passing or your selling of this property, that tax deferral is no longer valid. So 180, the heirs of this property have 181 days to pay the property taxes at the deferred amount, after which you would have to pay with penalty and interest fees as if this deferral never existed. So it is super important that if you are deferred on your property taxes and you are aware that you are deferring your property taxes, that if you are still owing a balance on them, you make sure that your heirs are aware. They may like to start paying it now. They may prefer to start paying property taxes while you're still living in that property, as opposed to waiting until afterwards in order to avoid having those additional penalty and interest fees assessed onto your account. One important note is that if you are still paying on your home, you are still in a mortgage or you're refinancing your home, whatever the case may be, you consult with your mortgage company before applying for this deferral, as not all mortgage companies will allow you to enter into a deferral, or if they allow you to, they may still require that you pay your property taxes to them directly, as they have a vested interest in your property. They are required to make sure that those property taxes are paid. So it's very important that you check that first before proceeding on. But again, as I mentioned before, make sure that if you are under a deferral or you're interested in a deferral, that you are keeping your heirs informed of your decision so that it makes it easier for them in the future. Another option that we have for our over 65 homestead owners are homestead disabled owners or homestead disabled veterans and their surviving spouses is something called a quarterly payment plan. And quarterly payment plans are, as the name states, it gives you the option of paying your property taxes in equal quarterly installments. If you are paying these installments in time, there is no penalty and no interest. And essentially what we do is we take the total amount of your taxes due and we divide it into 4 equal payments. That first payment would be due at the end of January, like normal. The second quarter would be due at the end of March, the third at the end of May, and the fourth at the end of July. Now, you do have to have these exemptions on your account in order for this payment plan to qualify. And even if you're, for instance, renting a property and you're over the age of 65, this would not be valid. So please just keep that in mind to make sure that you check in first before you make those payments, or that you are aware that you are able to do so whenever you're making your first quarterly payment here at our office. So really great option. No strings, no anything attached, no penalty and interest, and so long as you're making those payments timely, of course. Let's see. Now, for those of us who do not have the over 65 or disabled persons or disabled veterans exemptions, we do still have the option of paying our delinquent property taxes in payment agreements. However, this does still count for penalty and interest fees that would be assessed. What payment plans do is they protect you from additional litigation and collection fees that can get up to 20% of the total amount due. So it's really a great option for those of us who do not have those other exemptions available. You can have this with or without a homestead, and this can be applied to any type of property. This would be applicable towards if you own a spare lot separate from your home. This would apply towards your homestead. This would apply towards your rental property. This would apply towards a business personal property that you might own or have or owe property taxes to. And it is a very simple setup. You would just contact our office and request for a payment agreement. Let us know what length of time you would like that payment agreement to be for, either 12, 24, 36 months. And we would get that prepared for you, send out a contract to you in the mail or through email, but depending on your preference. And you would make those installment agreement payments as agreed. Our new system, our new website system allows for a lot of things that we just did not have the access to do prior to this roll around for this property tax year, including setting up due date reminders. This sends you a reminder to your email and makes it a lot easier for you to keep track of properties. And especially if you owe multiple properties or you own multiple businesses, it's a really great tool to help you keep track of all of those. It allows you to make secure payments through a system portal and a login so you can save your information as well as save all of the properties that you own in the same place. And it allows you to add all of those accounts to the same payment and make your life a little easier whenever you're going through that process every end of January. You are also able to see any receipts that you have paid through the system. Once you have your system set up and you have your login, you're able to access any of the receipts for your payments that you've made through that system. And it is a very clear and very easy, much easier way of going through the process. I've included a QR code here in case you would like to read into it a bit further, or if you have any questions and would like to check out the website, please be my guest. I absolutely recommend it. You're also able to request your delinquent payment agreements on the system, schedule reoccurring payments if you are planning or if you are making those delinquent payment agreement plans. You can schedule your payments in addition to allowing for ACH withdrawals, which we weren't able to do previously. One final thing that I'll like to touch on for this new system is the ability to make prepayments. Now, prepayments would be done in a way that would take your previous year's balance, so whatever taxes you owed for 2025 property taxes, it would take that amount and divide it between the point, however many months are between when you're creating that prepayment account and October. So between now and October, I believe we're at 3 months now. Or 2 months now. So it would take whatever amount you paid last year and separate it into two, and that's your prepayment plan program. Please bear in mind there's no penalty or interest for paying on this prepayment or not paying on this prepayment rather. It is just a tool in which will hopefully assist you in getting an idea of how much your property taxes will be and making a dent in whatever those property taxes are owed. Of course, the actual amount of your property taxes will be available to you about November, December, and that amount might not be exactly what you paid per your estimate. So you may still owe a small balance, or if it got reduced or you got a new exemption that wasn't on there previously, you might see a bit of a refund depending on how that shakes out. But it is a great option, especially as we come into this new year, to be able to have those prepayment plans in preparation for our 2027 property taxes. So keep that in mind. Aside from paying online, of course, you do have other options by which to pay, including paying by mail, by phone, or in person through any of our branch offices. Payment by mail, we do please request that you do not pay anything in cash, as these are not actual cashiers. This goes directly to our bank and those checks are scanned through. Paying on phone, you're able to make these payments through our automated phone system. This would be done through either a credit card or a debit card, and you're able to make those with that 2.4% fee. Or if you decide to come in person, of course, we do not collect an additional fee for processing checks or processing cash. There is an additional 50-cent fee for paying with an e-check, which is what you would use if you were to do this payment online. But all of these are options to you. We try to give you as many options as possible. I would like to impress upon you the importance of, if you are mailing in your payment to our offices, that you have a hand stamp from your post office, or alternatively, that you keep a hold of whatever tracking information you may use if you decide to send it to us via certified mailing. Those dates are invaluable because of the fact that that is the date on which we would go on for our receipt of payment. So please make sure that you are either getting those hand stamped before you go through and drop it off. Don't just drop it in a mailbox. Go to a post office. They'll stamp it for you, and that stamp will have that day's date so that we're able to process your payments appropriately. But just keep that in mind. And with that, we are committed to reducing your tax burden. While our office is not able to actively reduce how much you pay in your taxes, we are always trying to find new ways to make the process of paying your taxes as painless as possible, whether that's through creating payment agreements, by allowing prepayments for your property taxes, by submitting your bills to you via email, which might be a little easier for some than having the actual bill received in the mail, or by hosting these workshops and being able to impress and give this information to you that you may not have been aware of prior. But our office is committed to helping you in this process and making sure that your questions are answered. So please feel free to contact us. Our information is here on the board, as well as our QR code in case you would like to contact us directly. If you have any questions, I'm going to check the chat here in a minute, but feel free to drop a line. I'm sure Miss Mabel's going to go through and read those, as well as any that might have come in through our other connections through YouTube, Facebook, or her email directly. But I'll pass this on to Miss Mabel. I'm so happy I was able to have this connection with you guys and answer any questions that y'all might have. Thank you for your attention.
All right. There is a question in the chat for you, Shay.
Ooh.
If you could please mention the payment plan requirements for non-delinquent property taxes, or did she misunderstand? So just for clarification.
For clarification, if the account is not due yet and you do not have any delinquent accounts yet, you are able to enter into a prepayment so long as you do so before October. And those prepayment plans are really just to give you an amount of what would be paid in that time frame. So the reason that we stop it in October is because in October, we begin to actually send out our normal tax bills, our normal tax statements. And at that point, your next year's taxes would be due. But that estimate amount is it's more of an idea in order to be able to give you an idea of how much you would need to pay monthly in order to pay off the amount of that estimate before October. Any payments made prior to the delinquency have no penalty or interest. So any prepayments that you make to 2026 taxes, say for instance, you're paid up on your 2025, you haven't thought about it since January, but now we're in August and you would like to get a head start on your property taxes for 2026. A lot of folks share that mentality. They don't like to hold off forever. So you're able to make those prepayments starting as soon as you'd like, as often as you'd like, or as little as you'd like.
Okay. Ms. Mabel, I believe this will be a question for you and for Ms. Donna. I'm a disabled veteran that's using the homestead exemption, but my mortgage is still very high. What could I do to save money with this or other exemptions? The disability exemption is different from the regular homestead exemption, correct?
Yes. So I don't I'm sure she's trying to get her. There she is.
Okay.
And I think Donna's on here too. But yeah, the disability exemption essentially is the same as the over 65 exemption with one particular exception that has to do with the school tax ceiling, I believe. Donna, you're on here somewhere. But if he is receiving the 100% disability exemption, that's about the most that can be offered, unless he needs to come in and protest his value uh, that has been assigned to the property.
What do they need to do to, so is the regular homestead exemption, because it didn't mention it's over 65, is that a different amount for a disabled veteran versus the regular homestead exemption?
Hold on one second. Donna, you want to join in on this one? Because there are some exceptions for disabled veterans, but
Okay, well, you have you have your homestead exemption, and then if the disabled veteran is over 65 or a disabled person that's like under Social Security, they can apply for those two. And then you want to check and make sure you have applied for the exemptions in for the veteran at the rating that you are rated. So if it's under 100%, like there's if I'm 50 to 69% is my rating, there's that level. But if I'm 70 to 100%, so my rating increased, I would want to apply for that next level. The total VA, that exempts you from, taxes, but other than that, you want to make sure you have applied and for all the exemptions that you qualify for. And then the other thing, like Miss Mabel said, unless you have the total VA, you would want to protest each year, because if you can get your market below your appraised value, since the appraised value is what taxes are calculated from, then that lowers your taxes. So it's really, if you don't have the total 100%, you want to make sure you have all the exemptions you qualify for, and you want to protest, because if you can protest and get that market below your appraised, that will lower your taxes. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So to apply for a disabled veterans exemption, what do they need to submit, or what's that process?
Okay, so if it's under 100%, you're going to want you will want to use Form 11.22. And so you'll submit the application form, you can submit your driver's license, and you need a current VA letter that states your rating and the effective date it first began, not a change of the award. You want the effective date. And so you will submit that online. Now, if you're a total 100% VA, you use the same exemption application form for residence homestead, and that's Form 11.13. So, yeah, and you can always email us, the contact under contact us with the web inquiry or help@hcad.org, and just ask, this is my rating. And for a veteran, they also need to know they can go back 5 years. If they've not applied and they qualify, they literally can go back 5 years to apply for their veteran exemption.
For a regular person that's not a disabled veteran, how many years can they go back if
Well,
they've
yeah,
never applied for a homestead exemption?
okay, if you've never applied right now, you can go back 2 years. So you can go back to 2024 for late exemption application, because the years prior have passed.
Ms. Mabel, I'm not sure and I can't remember if you went over this or not. On you guys' website, do you still have the new thing on the website where people can like go through the little wizard or something to figure out what they owe, or like if they're eligible for certain exemptions? Is it still
Yeah,
there?
yeah, the exemption wizard, it should still be, I believe it's still there. I'm just gonna double check. If not, it's somewhere on our website. Let me just make sure. Um,
Okay, while you're looking for that, someone, Miss Donna had a question added on to that. So veterans with 40% disabled rating is how much of a discount? Or is there like
Shay,
certain levels? Is there like a dollar
yeah,
amount that
So it's
there's certain levels. Shay, would you know what the value is for that one?
yes. So for 40%, it is, oh, give me 2 seconds to verify. Because yes, it is a dollar amount per percentage, and then there's a range of percentages. So give me like 2 seconds to bring up
Okay.
my
While
chart.
she's looking for that, let me give you the quick answer for the exemption wizard. It's not on the front page as it had been for the last few months. However, when you go in, just type exemption wizard into the search bar and it comes up.
Okay, and I have the answer for that percentage. So a range between 30 and 49% of a disabled veteran is a exemption of $7,500. So that $7,500 is subtracted from the appraised value of your property after the homestead and after any other exemptions that are applicable.
Okay.
So in the grand scheme of things, it's not an excessive amount, but it is something to have in addition to the exemptions that you might already be applicable for.
Okay. And can you guys see the screen, the exemption wizard page?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just wanted people to see. So I just did a search and it took me, but I'll include this link in the email that I sent to you guys if you want to go through the wizard. So this kind of will help people figure out like what kind of exemptions that they would be eligible for. Is that correct, Ms. Mabel?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So I will send that out or I include that in the link. Let me go back to the questions. Okay, so she said thank you for that. I thought there was another one. Okay, so that was that. Next question that I had that was emailed to me. How do I get my exemptions back when they were removed because the co-owner of the property is a corporation?
Hey, Donna.
So, I'm not quite understanding if
And
the, if
I,
the,
let me give you a little
oh,
bit of context here because I think I recall this person that called to our office. Um, Disabled person living in a property that was inherited by their parents. It was siblings. The one sibling sold her share to a corporate to an investor. So when the investor then bought the property, then he lost his exemption.
all right. So if, say, the corporation owns 50% and another property owner owns the other 50%. I've not really seen that, but they would be able to apply for their 50% with any exemption. But to have it, what would happen with an ownership change, that does make the exemptions come off. So you would have to reapply to have it reinstated. You would want it reinstated. So you could email in and just, ask someone, I need direction on how to have my exemption or exemptions reinstated for my 50% of ownership. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, yeah, with ownership changes, what happens is we change the ownership in that 1 year, the exemptions are set to non-renew, and then they're removed the next year. So you may not realize that. It just, the system does that. So if you've had a homestead exemption on there and you still are a named owner, then you would want to reapply to have those exemptions reinstated.
Okay. And to give you guys a little bit deeper context, this person was referred to an attorney because the investor is trying to force sale of the property to take his share of, because I'm not sure what the percentage breakdown is, but he's a resident there, and I was assuming, from my understanding, that she had more than 50% when she sold it. So now they're trying to actually force the sale and get him out of the property. So that was a whole long, extensive kind
Oh,
of thing. So I've already referred him to an attorney to talk to about
attorneys
that.
first. That
But
was
as an FYI, that kind of thing happens all the time when you've got multiple heirs and they sell to investors. An investor can force to try to force a sale for the other shares of the property if but that's another subject altogether. That
we
was
do
last
have
That's
week's.
a whole nother bucket.
That's
and
a whole
have
other
a
bucket.
we do have a workshop on that.
I said that, yeah, that was last week's presentation. That was last week's presentation, but yes. So if you guys have any additional questions about that, please feel free to contact us. Someone else wants to know, I want to know more about the tax rates in my area to determine what am I paying. How does somebody find out that and then calculate what they're
So
paying?
yeah, so first you would want to check to see which jurisdictions are applicable to you. Every jurisdiction works independently because aside from Harris County jurisdictions, which all are determined by the same commissioner's court for Harris County, but every jurisdictions work independently in order to determine what value they are required to have for their tax rates in order to uh, receive enough funds for their maintenance and operations through taxes. So it is a bit of a complicated process as to how they determine that, but I'm not going to get into it too deeply. The part that directly can impact and can be impacted by property tax owners is making sure that you're aware if they are having hearings for their tax rate adoption process. There's a really great website, Truth in Taxation, that kind of keeps track of those as they're being released and as they are being determined. But they are required to put notices of that in their system. So make sure that you're checking the websites for those jurisdictions. They'll have their rate adoption during their, I believe it's like a monthly meeting type of situation, and they all have their own name for it essentially, but they all have a meeting which is open and available to residents of Harris County for them to go and sit in and be a part of, and have their voices be heard, of course. So make sure that you're checking those. They're all independently, so unfortunately I don't have the information for every single one of them. Like I said, we collect the property taxes on their behalf, but we do not necessarily take part in that process. They determine what their rates are, and then they provide us with their rates so that we are able to calculate their taxes appropriately. But that is something that you'll want to go and attend or read about or kind of be informed of in the process, it's one of those things where I just always have to be super clear that you always want to be a part of the process, because if you let the process go without you, then, aside from just being notified of how much you're going to pay, then you're not really playing a full part of what you're able to do. So, go check and see on your jurisdictions. First of all, see which are applicable to you, which tax and jurisdictions collect on your property. And then make sure that you're attending those meetings if they're available to the public, which they should be. But make sure that you're tuning into those meetings, make sure that you're aware of what it is and the funds that they're requiring, and that you're playing a part in that process. Of course, this tax rate is applicable to everybody. It's not just you, yourself, and your property. This tax rate is applicable to everyone that jurisdiction collects property taxes on behalf of. So make sure that, you're going in there with the mentality of, okay, this is in order for, just say, emergency services to have their maintenance and operations taken care of for that fiscal year or for that tax year.
And typically, Shay, those happen during July, August, and September.
Yes. And then in October, they kind of come to those final agreements, or they have those numbers in mind already. They have what they're requiring to pay. And then at that point, any increases past that point, they'll have those meetings. And then at the latest October, we'll get those tax rates in. So now is about the time when those things are happening.
Mm.
Okay. I just saw the question that popped up, and I see Ms. Donna answered it, but I'm going to read it out loud anyway in case anybody else has the same question. What shall someone bring to an ARB protest?
So when you go to a protest, you want to bring any evidence, supporting evidence that you have that market value should be lowered. So if you believe, to sell your property January 1, you would have, like, say, repairs, all these things to get that to that market value. You would want to bring your supporting evidence, whether it's pictures and repair estimates. So it's like whatever, or if you happen to have a recent purchase price, like you bought, it was a qualified sale and you purchased the property, and that market value is a lot higher than what you paid, you could always bring your signed closing settlement statement. So just whatever evidence you have that supports lowering your market value, that's what you would want to bring to the hearing.
And one of the reasons, if I just kind of add, that we encourage people to protest is because in the state of Texas, we have we are a non-disclosure state. So folks who do not have to reveal how much they paid for a particular property. However, we tend to get that information from either the individuals when we ask them at HCAT, or we send, we buy that from private vendors who keep those listings. So it's important to remember that we may not have all the sales information in your area. So you may have some that you may be bringing to the table something that we do not have, in which case it could very well mean that an adjustment in your favor.
Okay. Here's an interesting question. I think we kind of touch on this a little bit too. What happens? Let's see. I am curious as to how this works when the owner received a property tax exemption on a house that was placed into a trust. What happens to the exemption once they do that?
That is a very important question. So if the account goes into a trust, remember when I shared how when ownership changes, so say I put the name, my property into a trust today, what will happen is my exemptions this year will be set to non-renew and removed next year because we cannot grant exemptions in the name of a trust. However, the Texas Property Tax Code does have a provision for this. So you want to be sure that your trust agreement, your trust document, has the verbiage that you are able to live in your primary residence rent-free. And so what happens is when I talked about you have to have it reinstated. So I put it in the name of the trust. My trust does say that I can occupy my residence rent-free. Next year, I'm going to have to submit an application, my driver's license. I'm going to request, I need my exemptions reinstated, and I have to submit a copy of the trust. And it has to have that verbiage in it. And when it does, then we can put the account back in the owner's name. We document the trust, we put the trust name in the mail to, and then we're able to reinstate their exemptions. So you would want to, that's basically it. When you put it in, there's nothing wrong with putting in a trust. You just need to make sure it has the right verbiage. And under our website, under the help tab, laws and rules, under that link, there is a copy of the Texas Property Tax Code. So,
Okay. Making sure I don't have other comments here in this YouTube channel. All right. Is there a thing such as for solar panel exemptions?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, there is. But do keep in mind, I think there is a limited time in which you can apply for that exemption. Is that not correct, Donna?
I'm sorry, I was answering the person's
Oh, sorry.
question in the chat.
The solar panel exemption, there's an exemption, but there's also a limited time in which you can apply.
Is it the same level of exemptions, or is this in addition to the regular homestead, or it like how does
So from my understanding of it is the solar exemption is for the value of the solar panels that would normally increase the improvement value of your property is essentially just removed. So your property value stays the same as it was prior to the solar panels being added, even though the addition of solar panels would normally increase the value of your property. And please correct me, HCAT, if I am incorrect.
That's important.
Did you say something, Ms. Mabel? I couldn't hear you.
No, I'm still waiting. I believe that's correct. I'm just still waiting on Donna to verify that.
Yeah, it's not like an additional on top of what you already have currently. But while the addition of solar panels on your home would typically increase the value of your improvements, the exemption essentially removes what that value would have added. So you end up at the same level as you would have if you did not have the solar panels, but now you have solar panels.
So it really doesn't make a difference if you put it on there or not.
Oh, it would have made a difference if it wasn't there.
And it is important to remember that that exemption, when we talk about exemption deadline, you do definitely have to apply for that by April 30th. Or
Yes.
you will lose the opportunity to have it exempted for the year.
For that year. There's no prorated start for that one.
Okay, so let me go back to what you just said to make sure I'm hearing this correctly. If by adding
First,
solar panels, it could increase the improved value, but the discount that you receive from getting the solar panel exemptions puts you right back,
offsets.
offsets the difference.
Yes.
So if it wasn't there, then what would
The
be the
value. So if the exemption did not exist, the addition of solar panels to your property would increase the value of your property, so you would get taxed on more.
so if you didn't even apply for the exemption,
The value of your property goes up, you get taxed on that
okay,
value,
gotcha,
and it
gotcha.
increases your tax amount.
So it
But
helps with not increasing the value, but there's no additional,
yes, you do not get an additional
additional.
lower
Okay,
tax bill for
gotcha,
having solar, but you do
gotcha.
not get an additional amount taxed on you for having solar.
Okay, gotcha.
It's less of an incentive and more of a, what's the worst that could happen? You're not going to get taxed more because of it. You're just going to have solar.
And if you don't apply for it, you got an increased property tax bill.
Correct. And you
Okay.
got to do that before April.
Well, you just got to make sure that you know that the cost is going to outweigh the what is the cost outweighs the benefit of the reward
Right. Yeah,
when you
exactly.
get
And I
the
mean,
solar panel.
the benefits of solar are completely separate, but there's not really a benefit. It's just net neutral.
Um, do you see any new laws coming that would lower property taxes? Any
So
new?
there are quite a few that are in the talks. We haven't gotten any like actual solid proposals that I am aware of as of this moment. However, uh, I keep
State
trying to,
legislature convenes in January,
yes.
and they have quite a few bills on the table to reduce property taxes even further. So we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah,
I'm
we have to wait until any of those laws pass is the question.
I'm still curious as to how what would get done for the amount of money that you collect in property taxes that pays for all of these other services. If you're discounting the property taxes, where does the additional funds then come from to do the other things that the property taxes would have typically covered?
Are
The
you referring to like the jurisdictions and like the processes that they cover, or
Well, I mean, pretty much everything. So if you're constantly reducing property tax bills, which I'm not opposed to, so we're not going to get real political here, but I'm just curious
Hmm.
as to how does that offset? Where does the balance come in at? Because that's a lot of money that the county now will no longer cover. I mean, that will no longer be collecting. So if you're not
So
collecting the property taxes, then that means that's less of a budget for
everything else.
everything else to be paid. Yeah.
Yeah, and essentially what happens is the less money that we receive from property taxes, they have to come up with that within their budget somewhere else. So you see a lot of schools that are kind of hurting because they don't have as much funds from property
Exactly.
taxes that are now having to resort to state funding or nationwide
Exactly.
funding, which typically shouldn't be happening in the first place. But now they have to kind of branch out and see, okay, well, I'm not getting enough money through my property taxes. Now, where am I going to find the funds for this? And then that involves the state and then what funds that they have. And school is just an easier example of what to do that from. But you would see the reduction in your property taxes, you might see an increase somewhere else. For example, for like MUDs and water districts, utility districts, um, they don't abide by a lot of property tax exemptions only because every jurisdiction
They're
determines
separate.
what exemptions they have.
Hmm.
So you don't see a whole lot of those with a lot of exemptions on them. And if they do, they're not as big an amount because they don't have as much funding elsewhere to pull from. They don't get state grants for water districts. They don't get city grants for water district. They have what they get from property taxes, and that's pretty much it. So,
And so what exactly do the property taxes cover?
oh, a lot of things. So property taxes are made to cover maintenance and operations. So a lot of people like to think it's like, oh, well, it's, you know, the gas and fire trucks, which isn't necessarily the case. Just as an example, an EMS collects property taxes. They're collecting property taxes in order to, kind of keep the lights on in the building. They're able to have their maintenance for the processes that they have to do throughout the year, but not for specific to the job situation. So every jurisdiction collects for something different, but all of it is for maintenance and operations. And that's just for the basic barest of bones of what they do. So it could result, so drastic reductions in that could result in, less facilities available for them to house employees to get the job done, right? That could result in, a couple of other different things, but essentially it's for the maintenance and operation of whatever that jurisdiction is for. And if you want to look at your tax bill to see what jurisdictions you pay to, that kind of shows you like where those maintenance and operations are going to. But they should have all of this whenever you're going through the process of seeing how much those rates are going to be. They're required to have that in there. That includes, things like that.
Or also requires, could also result in local jurisdictions having greater dependency on the state, which pulls in money from the sales tax, which we definitely do not want to see it go up more than it already is. So that's another potential scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if somebody has more particular questions about their exemptions, who at HCAT do they just ask for an exemption specialist when they call, Miss Mabel? Or
Yes,
you go back to the slide that had the contact information for the,
sure.
so that's a question that was put in the chat here.
Okay.
Yeah, that would go to the appraisal district, and the appraisal district would then be able to assist with any jurisdiction or any exemptions that are there, are not there, should be there, should not be there.
Use that. I'm going to go back to that slide so she can see that too.
Okay. The other question that I always pose of you, Shay,
Mhm.
if somebody's got past due property taxes that are owed, and then somebody else pays for them, that entitled them to any kind of ownership in the property whatsoever.
Nope, absolutely not. Property taxes do not have any claim of ownership. If you're paying someone else's property taxes, you're just being a kind person and paying someone else's property taxes. Or you're making their life more difficult by making them pay later on with penalty and interest fees when they could have been able to pay without them. But all in all, it doesn't actually affect ownership. There's a whole other process aside from that that they would need to go through in order to receive ownership of a property. But it doesn't actually affect the ownership of it.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Can someone put a lien on your property? You mean if they pay your property taxes? Was that the question? Miss Tina. Well, you could have unmuted yourself. We haven't spoken to you in a while. Okay. So yes. So if somebody else pays your property taxes, can they put a lien on your property for the payment?
So there is a separate like process to go through in order to put a lien on a property, but that doesn't necessarily designate ownership. That's just they owe you for whatever the amount of that lien is of whatever you paid to that property, and then they owe you that amount of what you paid to their property, and that's what that lien does. But as far as like property tax liens, typically those are done. I'm sorry.
I think Miss Tina unmuted herself.
Oh, okay. Um, but yes, so property tax liens do exist. But typically property tax liens are different than liens on a property. they're separate, and there's separate processes. So if you have a lien on a property, then you're dealing directly to that owner, not necessarily for the property itself. You don't own that property because you paid their property taxes. You just paid that amount, and that now they owe you that amount. So if they pay you in that amount of what they owed for property taxes, then great. But there's a whole other process to unpaid property tax bills that is completely separate. But that's a whole nother court process.
Is that like you have to get an attorney for that or something?
I'm not exactly sure what the process is, because we don't deal with liens that are separate, like separate liens. We deal with property tax liens, which are taxes owed for.
I would imagine that somebody would have to go through the process of suing you, saying that
Yeah,
why they are trying to attach a lien to your property. So it's not like they can just go down there and just go file and say,
right.
oh, I just want to put a lien on somebody's property just because. They got to
Yeah.
go through the legal process to actually get that done.
Yeah, there's a whole process to it aside from that, but it's not anything that would be done through our office. So if you're putting a lien on a property because of taxes or maintenance or whatever else you may have paid to that property, it's a completely separate event. You would have to go through separate attorneys in order to do so. It's not tax liens, it's a separate lien.
Okay. So for the person that had the question about the exemptions, and glad to see you again, Miss Tina. Thank you for coming back. For the person that had the question about the additional questions for exemptions, Ms. Mabel put the slide on the screen there, and you can go down to 13013 Northwest Freeway, and go to the third floor to the customer service counter, or call and make an appointment. Then you can also reach out to our email, help@hcad.org, for additional assistance regarding the exemptions. You can call their phone number, 713-957-7800. Okay, all
And
right.
Nia, you can also, on the online one where we have the contact us form, you can put in specifically what your issue is so that it'll be immediately routed to the appropriate department.
Okay. All righty. Those were, nope, I'm sorry, I skipped one here, one that was emailed. What happens if someone receives a default judgment for property taxes, for unpaid property taxes?
Defaulted judgment.
I guess if I don't, this is help
As
with
in,
settling a
so
default judgment for property taxes.
as in they are in default and now have a judgment, is what I'm thinking is the phrasing here.
That
So
was the email, so I have no idea.
yeah, no, it's there's
Okay.
there's a lot of words that are tossed about, unfortunately. So essentially a judgment means that the property taxes are typically already sent to collections. So an office or that collects property taxes has contacted their attorneys in order to proceed with collection of these property taxes. They have to go through the courts and they have to put a judgment on that property stating, this account is delinquent in their property taxes in the amount of XYZ amount. They put in a hearing through the court. The court then has to have that out. Other taxing jurisdictions that have delinquencies of property taxes on that account may adhere themselves to that same judgment. So say you have a school that collects separately from Harris County Tax Office, and that school has not received payment of your property taxes. They first go through their collections attorney. That collections attorney then processes through that judgment. And if that judgment is on there, Harris County Tax Office, while they may have like a payment agreement, or if they're in the process of making payments, might still join in that suit in order to be able to recuperate those delinquent penalty or delinquent amounts of property taxes. So it sounds like they may need to get a hold of the attorney. In our case, if it's Harris County, it would be a Harris County Attorney's Office, in order to verify what the exact amounts are going to be in order to get that paid off, whether they can get into a payment agreement or whether they would need to pay the amount in full, or whether they would need to pay just the court fees and the associated costs with the attorneys. It's going to kind of depend on the process that they've gone through, how far they've gotten into it, and what all is going on. So that is something that they would want to reach out to for further assistance. But it's not something that I can answer without actually looking at the information and seeing what part of the process that they're in. But if they have a judgment, more than likely they already have court fees assessed onto that account as well. Aside from what we're collecting, the court collects their fees as well, the attorneys collect their fees as well, and then they have those other associated fees. So they'll want to verify that information before they go making payments, because what will happen a lot is they'll go through that process, they'll be in a judgment, they'll have those court fees, and then they come to us directly, they pay the property taxes, and they think that that's that. And unfortunately, that's not the case. They'll still owe those other additional fees aside from what they owe originally. They'll owe for, court costs and associated other fees. So
Okay.
make sure that you're informing yourself.
One last question. If someone lives, outside of the city and they have mud taxes or PUD taxes, do they have to contact those individual districts to find out if they have additional exemptions or other exemptions, or are they just automatically applied once you apply for homestead exemption?
When you apply for the exemptions, they're applied to every jurisdiction that, for instance, HCAD, if HCAD is assessing the values on the property for that jurisdiction, it gets applied across the board. So once you have the homestead exemption, the homestead exemption gets applied to every jurisdiction that has a homestead exemption. So
Gotcha.
You just fill out one application, and that one application submitted to the Harris Central Appraisal District applies across the board. And that's kind of why it's so important to have, a central appraisal district as opposed to every single jurisdiction assessing their own values
and contacting everybody to apply for all these different exemptions. Yeah,
exactly. It's a great help. It's really a lot easier this way. And people say that, oh, it's so complicated. Well, the alternative is much worse, I promise.
Well, and I just wanted to also add something to that in that I think when the tax code was first adopted back in the mid-70s, it might have been around 60 pages, and now it's over 600. Because each year as the legislature meets, there going to be some kind of changes, and that's one of the reasons I want to just stress to everyone that while we really appreciate people being on these calls, we hope you talk with your neighbors at least to say, if you don't understand it, then please feel free to contact HCAT. That is what we are here for. That is our customer service mantra, is to try to help walk people through this to make sure no one is paying more than their fair share in property taxes.
Gotcha. Okay, I believe that was my last question. I didn't have anything else. Again, the recording of this session, I will be emailing out the link so that you guys can watch the presentation, or you can go to our YouTube channel. It will be posted there as well, but that link will be included. Please share it with your neighbors or anybody else, again, that may find this information to be helpful as well. Let's see what else. Oh, we didn't talk about the difference between the deferral. We mention this all the time, the deferral versus the exemption, about paying back, because we already get a lot of seniors, that still get a little confused about, oh, I applied for that, I don't owe any property taxes, when they've gotten a deferral versus applying for exemption. Do you
So
guys
an
want to touch on that?
exemption, yeah. So an exemption is I hate to say the word, but it's a discount to the taxable value of your property. So the lower your taxable value is, the less you pay in property taxes. A deferral is a postponement of taxes. One reduces the value, one gives you more time to pay on that value. So the deferral gives you additional time in which to pay, but those taxes are still owed. Doesn't matter what the amount is, those taxes are still owed, versus an exemption of property taxes, which reduces your taxable value and reduces your bill. and that amount doesn't come back on. It doesn't like adhere and stay on forever. It doesn't become due whenever you no longer live in that property. It's as long you live in that property and are there, you are able to enjoy that reduction to your taxable value, versus, like I said, a deferral, which just postpones the amount of time that you have, or it gives you an additional time in which to pay those property taxes. So you can have both. You can have the exemption, which reduces how much you pay total, and you can also have the deferral that gives you additional time on which to pay those amounts. Sometimes you can have the amount that is due with those exemptions equal zero. Sometimes if the value of the property is less than the value that your exemptions are worth, you get a $0 tax bill. If you have a deferral on a $0 tax bill, the amount that you owe is still $0.
So for deferral, if my great grandmother has had a deferral for the last 8 years and she passes away,
Mm-hmm.
there's still 8 years worth of property taxes that are due, correct?
Correct.
And how long do the heirs have to pay the property
The def
tax, the
so
deferred taxes?
the deferred amount of property taxes, they'll have 180 days to pay. The property taxes, period, will just increase after those 180 days, after those six months. Because after which you get assessed penalty and interest as if that deferral never existed.
Mm. 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 Can you enter, can an heir enter in a payment arrangement then at that point? Like if they didn't know that a parent, a grandparent, or whomever have had deferrals for all this time, and now they realize, they only have 6 months to pay 8 years worth of property taxes. Are they eligible to then enter into a payment arrangement then?
Not for the deferral amount. We would have to wait until that deferral comes off, and then they can enter into a payment agreement on that full penalty and interest amount.
Oh,
But they cannot enter into a payment agreement for that deferral amount. Now, can they pay, however much they can pay at that time per month? Yes, absolutely. You don't have to pay in one lump sum, but just be aware it's 5% per year, and you have 180 days to pay that total amount of what is due throughout that whole amount of deferral time. And if that means, hey, I have, $10,000 to pay over the course of 10, or, however long it is between then and there, then, split that payment up and make your payments appropriately, and whatever is remaining after that would get assessed with the penalty and interest. But at least you're lowering it based off of that reduced amount instead of just waiting for it all to come off and then paying on a payment agreement.
so you still in essence only have the 6 months to pay as much as you can before that 181st day.
Right. Exactly. So say, for instance, like I said earlier, there's $10,000 owed. You have 6 months to pay as much as you can. If that's $1,000 each month, then you're down to $4,000 instead of 10,000. And it hurts a lot less for $4,000 plus penalty and interest versus $10,000 plus penalty and interest.
Okay. So let me ask this question when it comes to the deferrals for that length of period of time. When you got, example, $10,000 worth of bills that's been collected over the last 5 years, is it based on per year that the penalty and interest, or is it the overall total that the penalty and interest? Because if I owe $10,000 and I've paid off six, but that's only for 3 years. You know what I mean?
So
How does it
this is
then?
a fun question because they all move independently. Every year is assessed on its own.
Okay.
Every year stands alone.
Okay.
So, for instance, let's go back a little bit less time. Let's go back 2 years, right? The taxes were deferred for 2 years, or rather, taxes went unpaid for those last 2 years of that deferral, right?
Mhm.
So going back to 2024, taxes for 2024 were due. Well, actually, one further year back. Taxes for 2023 were due January of 2024.
Mhm.
February of 2024, the amount of taxes owed in January are incurred with a 7% penalty and interest fee. March of 2024, those taxes are incurred with a 9% penalty and interest fee. Then March, April is with 13, 11%, then 13, then it continues to accrue per month. And then at some point it caps off.
Okay, that was my next question.
At some point it caps off. It takes a while, and you keep assessing a 1% interest per month, and then it's penalty per month as well. So then the next year comes around, and this is what I mean by penalty and interest as if it never existed. Next year becomes due January of 2025. In January of 2025, you're still owing for 2023. You're still owing for the previous year. You assessed penalty and interest for a full year. And then in addition to that assessed penalty and interest plus the amount that was originally owed, you're now owing a whole nother year. And that whole other year, if you pay in January, you're paying timely for that year, but not the year prior. If you continue to go on without paying, you then owe penalty and interest again, starting at 7% for that new year, then 9, then 11, then 13. And it continues to assess. And they're all going independently because they're all going on separate. They're all their own entity. You owe every year individually.
So if you owe for multiple years for like in this instance for a deferral, can you then how a payment arrangement has to be made for each year, correct?
Yes, every year you pay your property taxes by the end of January.
So if you're making payments on multiple years, or can you enter into a payment arrangement separately for each year or for the total that's
It's
owed?
for the total. You are
Okay.
able, so say for
Okay.
instance, again, I did not pay my 24, 25 taxes, right? That's what's owed as of this moment. It's 24 and 25. 26 is coming up due here at the end of January this upcoming year, which comes a lot faster than you'd think. But for now, 24 and 25 taxes are owed. As of this moment, I can get into a payment agreement for 24 and 25 property tax years. That adds together all the penalty and interest for however long that payment agreement is for on those 2 tax years. Come January, I'm still going to owe my 2026 property taxes. I am going to try my best to pay those property taxes timely so that I can continue on my payment agreement without also having new penalties and interest from this new upcoming year. Because I'm still going to owe those taxes. And if I go delinquent past those taxes, I cannot start a new agreement until I have paid off my previous one.
Sure.
So that doesn't protect me from collection fees. That doesn't protect me from additional litigation. That doesn't stop, an attorney from taking me to court over these unpaid taxes, right? So, and it is one of those things where we have to be incredibly transparent, is that you are entering into an agreement for this year prior, but you are not entering into an agreement including next year. Next year's not even due yet. We can't create an agreement for you for next year. But that's also kind of where the prepayment agreement that we started doing this year comes in. Because yes, I'm owing for previous years, but say, it's January of, let's see.
2027.
Yeah, January of 2027. I'm owing 2026. I would hopefully have either the amount to pay that off in full, or I will have been making payments to pay that off in full while paying my delinquent property taxes. And hopefully that all gets done, that 2026 taxes are paid off by January. But then I get a step ahead. I create a prepayment agreement for 2027 taxes in 2027. Because, we pay taxes in arrears. So February of 2027, I create a prepayment agreement for my 2027 tax year. I'm still making my monthly payments for my previous tax years that I owed delinquent on. But then come the following year, I owe significantly less on my 2027 taxes because I've already paid on an estimate. you know, if I keep up with those payments. But they're all tools to help us pay these taxes off, because the alternative is being delinquent and then not having any kind of proof that you're attempting to make these payments to your property taxes.
Yeah, but then it's still kind of then hard at that point to get out of the cycle. If you owed for multiple years and you've entered into a payment arrangement to do that, and then you're making prepayments for the current year. So if it's 2027, you've kind of made prepayments for the 2026 taxes while making payments on previous tax years. By the time the end of the year gets there, you're now at penalty and interest accrued for the 2026 taxes on top of all the old stuff because you're still making payments on everything.
If I'm
So
not able to pay by
if you're
January, yeah.
yeah, that it develops a cycle then at that point, and you are right, Miss Tina. Yeah, it's a cycle. And
Yeah, and
once you get behind, it's kind of hard to
that is why we
get.
kind of let folks know, like, look, this is a payment agreement for previous years, but remember, taxes for 2026 are going to be due here before we know it. That's less than half a year away. We got
Mhm.
4 months to pay as much as you can or to save as much as you can towards next year's taxes, in addition to paying what you're already paying. So don't get into a payment agreement, then kind of just, you know, I'll figure out the rest of the taxes later. Make sure that you're preparing yourself for next year's taxes so that when it does hit, it hits a little less painfully. And if you're able to make prepayments instead of, if you're the type of person that, you know, you can't save because, you know, there's always some kind of emergency going on, which I understand. I'm human too. I pay taxes too. But if that money is already gone, that money is already gone. You're already making those payments. They're already being applied to future year taxes.
Or
And then it
escrow
hurts a
yourself.
little bit less. Right.
Do your own escrow.
Yep. Be your own escrow, be your
Yep.
own bank, you know, and make sure that you're making those payments ahead of time so that you're not having to go through as much pain later as you would have
Yep.
otherwise. But yeah, unfortunately, it can become a pretty vicious cycle, especially when you know, you owe for many, many previous years, because some folks do. Some folks owe for a lot of years of prior delinquent taxes. So, you know, it's always best to kind of keep on top of it while you can stay on top of it. Um, and you know, it's always best to not owe if you can, but that's what these tools are for, is to kind of help folks get a handle on these things, so long as they're financially preparing themselves for the future as opposed to just kind of taking care of the past.
Yeah, this is why it's also important to make sure that you're having those conversations with the family members, especially the, your mothers, your grandparents, and great aunts and uncles or whatever that do have these deferrals. If they
Mhm.
have not paid these taxes, what does that mean for the heirs? Have the conversation to know if they haven't paid their taxes. Get confirmation if they applied for deferrals versus various exemptions and things like that, so that they don't then fall into this kind of a cycle where you've got somebody that's trying to pay property taxes for multiple years by themselves, especially if there's
Mhm.
multiple heirs, or if you've got a person that's living in the house with a parent who qualified for the exemption. Now all of a sudden they're in jeopardy of being unhoused because taxes haven't been paid. So
Mhm.
have conversations with your family. That's all it comes down to. Make sure you communicate that. So with that being said, we are right just about at 3 o'clock, and I know Miss Mabel, you had a hard stop that you needed to do. So, and I believe I've gone over all the questions that I had that were emailed to me and that were put in social media. So, I want to thank you all very much for joining us and engaging us and asking these questions. Um, the contact information and the links, all the resources that were mentioned will all be emailed out to you all for you to go back to watch again, or to kind of look up all these different forms to apply for the various exemptions, the contact information to set up payment arrangements if that's what's needed to be done. Um,
Mhm.
and so we invite you to come back for other a month of service presentations. Our future property tax workshop is going to be in October 1, 2, 3, 4. October the 28th will be our next property tax workshop. However, We did confirm that when we do our next inherited property clearance title and deferred property taxes, we will be in person on October the 15th at the Third Ward Multi Service Center. So look for that information to come to you all if you would like to come and hear the presentation in person or to speak with somebody directly. We will be in person in October for that presentation. Tomorrow we have our one of our series for our foreclosure prevention. Tomorrow is our HOA property taxes. Well, happy birthday in advance to you, Miss Tina. Our HOA foreclosure is tomorrow when people are facing foreclosure due to HOA fees that have been unpaid and wanting to know what it is that an HOA can or cannot foreclose on you for. That presentation is going to be tomorrow. That's a very good one because we get a lot of folks that have disputes and things with their with their HOA and um, applying all kinds of fees and penalties for trees and fences and roofs and cleaning and not cleaning. There's a lot, so that's a very interesting conversation. So please come back and join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. for that. Um, Miss Shay, Miss Mabel, Miss Donna, thank y'all very much for joining us this afternoon and taking your time out. We appreciate all of you guys for the partnership as well as for you all, the participants, for coming back and continuing to support this collaboration. So we hope that you all have a wonderful remainder of your afternoon. You all take care of yourselves. There's a little box that pops up on the screen. If we can get you all to complete our quick survey for us, that will be wonderful. So that lets us know if we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. And if there's more that you guys would like to see, then please reach out to us and let us know. But otherwise, we are all done for this afternoon, and we will hope to see y'all next time.
All righty. Thank you so much, Miss Nia. You have a great rest of your
Thank
day.
you. All right, you too.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.